Hi there, Emily Midget here with you today from 6th Street Sundries, and today I have a watercolor project featuring some new stamps from Colorado Craft Company called Floral Corners. I have used some watercolors from Sennelier, and I've used only 3 shades to color this entire image. So let's get started with the details. This Floral Corners stamp set is one of the new releases from the May release from Colorado Craft Company, and I've paired it with the Concord and Ninth Everyday Sayings dies, which has some really large sentiment greetings. And then I also have some Sennelier watercolors, which I've paired with Fabriano Artistico Extra White watercolor paper. This is a watercolor paper block, and it's a 5 by 7, and I really like that this watercolor paper is nice and bright white, which is usually watercolor paper has kind of a creamy undertone, creamy yellow undertone, and this one is a bit brighter white. It's a little bit cooler color undertone. So here I am going to do some heat embossing. I've prepped it with my anti-static tool, and then I'm going to use my Misty to get really good coverage because this is cold press watercolor paper. So it does have quite a bit of texture to it, and so I want to make sure that I get really good impression with my embossing ink. So I am stamping it multiple times using my Misty. And then I'm going to heat emboss it using brass embossing powder from Hero Arts. This is kind of, it's a little bit more intense, vibrant shade of gold than just a typical gold. Now here what I'm doing, I am using a flat watercolor brush to add some very diluted color to the entirety of the image, not paying any attention to the edges of the image. I want to create kind of an under layer of color, and then we'll go back in and we'll add some details with some more intense color. I am going in and I'm using just 3 shades. I've got kind of a magenta, a deep sapphire blue, and then kind of a jungle green color. And so I've wet the paper first and then added diluted, just kind of splotched that onto the wet watercolor paper and allowed it to bloom. And now I'm using my heat tool and a thirsty watercolor brush. This is a damp watercolor brush that is kind of sucking up that water. And then I dab it on my stamp chamois and it kind of sucks up some of that water, that excess water. So now I am using, these are the same 3 shades of watercolor that I used to do the underpainting for our first layer. They're just in more concentrated forms. They're a little bit more vibrant. Watercolor is wonderful, a wonderful medium because you can get so many different shades out of it. You can mix and match, you can add more water, you can add less water to create a more vibrant shade. And so what I am doing here is I am adding a more concentrated version of the same shades that I used on the underpainting layer. So because watercolor is transparent, some of those shades from that underpainting layer are still going to come through on that more concentrated layer, that more colorful layer. So we'll get kind of undertones of blue, some undertones of that bright jewel green. And it's just going to add a little bit of extra interest and color variation to our flowers. So now I've moved on. I've added the bright pink to those large cosmos blooms, and I'm just adding some of that deep sapphire blue to, there's some blueberries and some, I think they're delphiniums, and just a few other little filler flowers. And then we'll add some green to the foliage. This is that jungle green. And then I'm going to take all 3 of those colors and I'm going to kind of mix and match. I'm going to add different layers of color. I'm going to add different amounts of the blue to the purple. And I'm going to add some shadows. That first layer of that concentrated color was more to just get the basic idea of that this flower will be pink, this flower will be blue. Now we're going back and adding another layer with just to add a little bit of depth and shadow and to create the contrast of the petals on top versus the petals on the bottom, the darker petals on the bottom. So here I've mixed some of that magenta with that deep sapphire blue, and I'm just going back and adding just small amounts to create those shadows and create the depth and dimension that we're looking for. Nothing too terribly elaborate, nothing too terribly intricate as far as specific areas. We're just trying to add the illusion of a little bit of shadow. So there's our finished product. Now we're going to use the Everyday Sayings die from, it's the High die from Concord and Ninth. And I've got another piece of Fabrion Artistico paper that I've taped down to my watercolor board. And I'm going to use those same 3 shades of pink, blue, and green to create an ombre watercolor background. So I have marked off with a pencil where my die will eventually cut, just to make sure that I get good coverage for the entirety of the area that I need. And I'm just going through and I'm adding lots of really intense, vibrant color to my my watercolor panel. And I've dried it with my heat gun to make sure that it's nice and dry before I run it through my die cut machine. And now I have this beautiful kind of purpley pink to green ombre die cut. So this is, I believe it's called Purple Rain. It's from Tonic. It's a holographic purple cardstock, and we're going to use that to back our watercolor die cut, just to add a little bit of extra textural interest and difference to our background. This is the Pink Fresh Studio Stitched Diamonds background panel. That's a piece of lapis colored cardstock from Hero Arts, and I've run that through with that Stitched Diamonds background from Pink Fresh Studio. So now we're going to start assembling the card. I didn't make the die cut background very well. I didn't run it all the way through my die cut machine, so I do have to trim off some edges that I didn't get cut all the way through completely. But that's okay. It just adds one more opportunity for us to color coordinate with the florals. So I've added kind of, it's a coordinating shade of that magenta fuchsia color as a matte. So there's a nice matte around the edge, and we're just adhering together the foil and ombre watercolor die cuts. So now the next step, I thought it would be fun to add some more textural difference to the background. So I added a Simon Says Stamp nesting arched die. It's die cut from some really lovely glittery gold cardstock that coordinates nicely with the brass embossing powder that I used on the floral image. So I'm just adding that with some foam tape, and I added the blue die cut piece with some foam tape too. So we've got a double layer of foam tape, lots of height on this project. So I added the arch frame with some foam tape, and now I'm going to add the floral, watercolored floral die cut as well, with a combination of both foam tape and liquid adhesive to make sure it's adhered down nice and tight. So once that's adhered down nicely and dried, we'll go ahead and add our watercolored die cuts, die cut sentiments, and that will be almost finished at that point. I am using both liquid and foam adhesive to make sure that everything is adhered down nice and tight. But remember, we do have a double layer of adhesive, so this card's going to be really tall, and we're going to probably need a bigger envelope than just a standard A2 envelope. So then here we have our foil friend, the Purple Rain foil friend. And I like that this is iridescent because it picks up some of the blues and greens that we have in the watercoloring as well. So it just, all of the pieces, they kind of coordinate nicely together. They're all kind of color coordinated. So we add some iridescent gemstones to the card front, and that's the end of this card. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. I hope you learn something to use just a few watercolors. You can use a limited color palette to create really lovely images just by mixing and matching and adding and taking away water. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Thanks so much for watching. And if you like this video, give me a thumbs up and maybe hit the subscribe button to see some more content from me in the future. Have a great day. Bye.